All right, welcome to Inside Politics. I'm Manu Raju, in today for Dana Bash. We've been listening to President Trump in the Oval Office after signing new executive orders to ban flag burning and end cashless bail. He also ordered the Pentagon to train a specialized D.C. National Guard force that are, quote, specifically trained and equipped to deal with public order issues. Now, he did dismiss criticism that expanding his crime crackdown in D.C. to other cities is a classic strongman tactic.
As you all know, Chicago's a killing field right now. And they don't acknowledge it. And they say, we don't need him, freedom, freedom. He's a dictator, he's a dictator. A lot of people are saying maybe we like a dictator. I don't like a dictator. I'm not a dictator. I'm a man with great common sense and I'm a smart person.
A lot of people are saying maybe we like a dictator. This after President Trump spent the weekend threatening to investigate his political opponents and to deploy National Guard troops into cities with leaders who oppose him. CNN's Jeff Zeleny is live for us at the White House. So, Jeff, there was a common theme with these three executive orders.
Manu, there has been a common theme really through the month of August, and that's been authoritarianism. That is what the president has really talked about and emphasized for most days of this month, certainly recently. And signing those executive orders, really flexing the executive authority of the presidency. Now, it is unclear if all of these executive orders will actually be enforced, if some will be legally challenged. But the one that perhaps is the most interesting is the one you read at the beginning there, instructing his Secretary of Defense to create a specialized unit of the National Guard to effectively be at the ready to be deployed nationwide in the event of unrest. Now, of course, the National Guard can already be used for that, but this is something that sounded a bit different. We'll have to wait for some of the details. But the president talking specifically there about having a new form of National Guard to be able to deploy to cities across the country. Chicago, of course, has been in his crosshairs. The president contradicted himself just through his comments in the last hour in the Oval Office. He said at once he would send troops to Chicago and he would have the crime problem solved within a week. A few breaths later, he said he would not send troops. He likely would not send troops to Chicago. So we will see about all of this. But you're right, there is a common theme throughout the president's remarks. It's to change the subject, of course. We've barely heard him talk throughout the month of August about his legislative achievements. Of course, that One Big Beautiful Bill Act, where members of Congress have been defending it, at least Republicans have. The president has talked very little about that. But at the very end of that very lengthy Oval Office Q&A session, the president was also asked whatever became of that meeting with Vladimir Putin. President Trump, of course, now met in Alaska with Vladimir Putin more than 10 days ago, and he said there would be a meeting shortly with Putin and Zelensky. There are no signs of that meeting. In fact, the Kremlin has indicated that a meeting is not really being planned. There's certainly no urgency for it. President Trump was asked why that was. He said, look, they don't like each other. But perhaps it's more complicated than that or more simple, depends on your point of view. Putin wants more time here to extend the war. So, Manu, even as there are so many issues on the president's plate, he'll be meeting with the visiting president of South Korea any moment here. It's authoritarianism that has really been a theme here at the White House throughout the month of August.
Yeah, and we'll see if the president responds to any questions when he meets with the South Korean president, the new South Korean president, for the first time at the White House. Jeff Zeleny, who's live for us there. Thank you so much. And I'm joined by a terrific group of reporters here at the table. CNN's David Chalian, Tia Mitchell of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Tyler Pager of the New York Times. He's also the co-author of 2024, How Trump Retook the White House and the Democrats Lost America, and CNN's Edward Isaac Dovere. Isaac, of course, is a book author himself as well. You know,
from the last election.
From the last election, exactly, exactly. So let's just talk about what Trump. He's very much defending what's happening with this federal crackdown and his takeover of happening in D.C. And then he says, a lot of people are saying maybe we like a dictator. He says he doesn't like dictators, but a lot of people are saying it.
Yeah, he said he doesn't like dictators and he doesn't consider himself a dictator right after he said that. But you say he's defending the crackdown in D.C. I would say he's sort of championing it in many ways. I mean, he was repeatedly touting statistics of no murders, and it sounded like he wanted to tie it up in a bow and be like, problem solved. I came in here, and D.C. is the safest place in the world right now. And I'm not sure that all the statistics back that up, but he clearly seems on an accelerated path to try and wrap this up and say, job done.
Yeah, and it's unclear. He's made all these claims about what's happening in D.C. Says they're going to go in and fix the medians in D.C., beautifications in D.C. But, as part of this executive order, there's going to be to expand the use of the National Guard, something that had not really been done. Federalizing the National Guard is something that, without the governor's consent, had not been done since 1965 until he did it in California. They're going to do it in Chicago, it sounds like, and he's making very clear, based on his actions today, it's going to be much broader than that, too.
Yeah, and the question is how much of this is real and how much of this is performative. We all frequent D.C. We're in D.C. right now. The National Guard isn't necessarily on every corner. There are parts of D.C. that haven't seen the National Guard at all, and there's no evidence that the National Guard has actually contributed directly to whatever the crime statistics are showing right now, because they're not necessarily in the high crime areas of D.C. And the low crime areas were already pretty safe to begin with. So when you talk about the federalization of troops in California during the immigration raids, again, we don't really know what the impact was. It was pretty short-lived. The president moved on pretty quickly. So the question is, how much of this is really going to have an impact on the people who live in these cities, and how much of this is just the latest shiny object that President Trump is championing as he avoids talking about other bigger issues on his plate?
And how far is he willing to go here? Just look at some of the cities here with the highest homicide rates per 100,000 people. This is from 2024 data. Jackson, Mississippi, at the top of the list. D.C. is number 11 there, but you have a whole bunch of other cities that he is not talking about. Memphis, among them, Dayton, Ohio, Cleveland, and the like. You cover the White House, Tyler. What is the planning right now inside the White House? And is he actually going to go after any red states? Because blue states right now, blue cities, have been at the top of his mind.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things about the graphic you just showed is the highlighted yellow of those states sending their National Guard to D.C., right? I think we've seen this playbook before from the president, and it won't be the last time where he is using this issue as a political one, right? He is trying to make the case that he needs to intervene because Democratic-run cities are out of control in his parlance. And that's clearly not the case, backed up by data. There are a whole host of other cities, primarily in Republican-led states, that have higher crime rates, but that's not the focus for this president. We've seen him go after Chicago, LA. This weekend he was tangling with Governor Wes Moore of Maryland and talking about Baltimore. There is a playbook here that the president is using, and it's mostly driven by his politics. And one of the things just to note about Chicago, Chicago's crime rate has actually been decreasing and at times has been at pre-pandemic levels. And so this focus on this out of control crime is misplaced based on where the data is. Not to say that there's no crime, but if you really look at the numbers, it is not the sort of picture the president is
You heard them signaling out J.B. Pritzker, Governor Wes Moore, Gavin Newsom, 3 potential 2028 candidates. So that's one reason on his mind. Also, just you talked about the politics here, Tyler. The politics are very clear. The president laid it out himself on how he sees this issue playing out heading into the midterms.
I think this is another men and women's sports thing. I think this is one of those, they call them 80-20 issues. I call them 97-3. I think the Democrats better get smart. And, politically, I hope they don't. But actually, in terms of love for the country, I hope they do.
I mean, it's clear they see this as a wedge to use against Democrats. They've successfully done this in past election cycles. Trump thinks they can do it again.
Yeah, and look, we can talk about the politics of it. We're sitting here on a show called Inside Politics. It is, though, pretty significant that we're talking about a situation where American troops are being deployed onto American soil, where people who are showing up with weapons without any identification, without any explanation of who why they're grabbing, who they're grabbing, put them in the back of the cars. They're not saying where they're taking these people to. We don't really know what's going on with a lot of this. And so maybe people will respond to the talk of crime in the ways that they have traditionally in years past. But it's also, and look, David's point, if you walk around D.C. right now, you will see National Guardsmen around the the Lincoln Memorial, around the Washington Monument, when the Vice President and Secretary of Defense and Stephen Miller went to Union Station last week. That is not really where the crime rate has been exploding in the past in Washington. And there's a real question of how much is being done to address even the crime rate that the president says his goal is to address here.
Yeah, and we'll see ultimately what his next step is going to be. The president made pretty clear they're going to expand this crackdown and also continue to investigate some of his political opponents. That's something to watch as well.